This video was produced by
Well, good afternoon. My name is Tara Price. I'm a graduate assistant in the Career and Academic Planning Office. And today I'm going to be talking about resume writing and how to write a great resume and get that job interview. So just kind of questions to use in the room. Do we have any freshmen, first-year students? What about sophomores? Okay, a couple sophomores, great. Getting an early start to your resume writing, I like it. Juniors? A couple juniors. And what about seniors? Yeah, seniors, all right. So we're getting ready for the ultimate job search. Cool. All right, so today during this presentation, I'm going to provide some brief information on the basics of writing a resume. We're going to learn some of the different components, the content, the format, and the appearance. We'll talk about some frequently asked questions, and we'll also discuss some additional resources that you have available to you after this presentation. So what is a resume? First of all, your resume is an advertisement of who you are. What makes you unique? What are some of your competencies as a candidate for a position? What are some of your future capabilities? You have a skill set, and what can you build that skill set upon and grow in the future? Ultimately, this is your chief marketing tool to introduce yourself to your audience. And something also important to note about this is that you want to target your resume. So this is something specific that's for a specific position or graduate school or something like that. So from applicants' perspective, this tool is going to help you get interviews. Interviews lead to jobs, graduate admission, internships, leadership positions, and also scholarships. From a reviewer's perspective, the resume, it helps them screen people for the position. So they can take about a minute or two to look over each resume and decide if an applicant is someone they want to interview. And resumes should ultimately communicate value. A person of value is applying to that position. So when you are starting to compile your resume, the first thing you want to do is do your research. So there's two things. You want to know yourself and know your audience. So knowing yourself is knowing what your strengths are and communicating those in your experiences and skill sets. What are some of your interests as far as what you want to do in a position? What are some of your future goals? You also want to know your audience. So you should know the mission or vision of the company that you're applying to. How does your desire to work there fit in with what they're already doing? And then within your audience, know what they're looking for in an applicant. This will be in a job description, or a graduate school admission application. Try to find some of those keywords from that job description and make sure they're in your resume. So you want to match the language of what the employer is looking for. So again, targeting your resume. If you make a very generic resume and it's just got kind of some not descriptive skills on it, then the employer is going to think you'll just take any job. Why do they really want to work for me? Your resume is going to start communicating that. So here's some additional examples of targeting your resume. So with technical fields, you could include information like computer skills, use of lab equipment, technical or scientific techniques. For human services, you can include experiences relating to interpersonal and communication skills, being able to communicate difficult processes within a team. Or if you have any volunteer experiences, that can also add to your resume. If you're in a creative or promotion-related field, then you can make your resume a little more creative. That's for like graphic designers. That's the type of people that can really kind of go beyond that professional stand and make it stand out. So a good resume has three main components that we're going to talk about today. The first one is content, so this is information you choose to include. The second piece is format, and this is the way you lay out that content, what's coming first, second, third. And the final piece is appearance, so just how it aesthetically looks overall. So content, let's get into content. Here are all the things that content includes. It's going to be your name and contact information. It's going to be your objective, which can be optional. We'll talk about objectives here in a moment. Your education, which can also include courses, research that you're involved with, or research projects, papers and projects. Experience, this can be work that's paid or unpaid within internships, externships, clubs or organizations, volunteer service. You also can include skills in your content, technical, foreign language, lab communication, and then some other additional categories that are optional for you. Study abroad and travel, honors and awards, certifications or trainings. And then references are actually going to be a content that's on a fully separate page, so you're not going to put your references on your resume. So here's what an example of the contact information could look like. You'll notice that they've got their name nice and big. You always want your name in a bigger font than the rest of your contact information. You want it to stand out somehow. However you highlight that, it can be all center aligned, it can be left aligned, right aligned. Be creative, be yourself, be unique. You'll notice that the first example has one address for Harrisonburg. The second one has a current and a permanent. So if you are looking for employment maybe at a permanent address, if you're looking back home, you'd want to include that home address. But if you're looking mostly in this area, it can be beneficial just to list one address as well. And then you always want to include a phone number and an email address. And make sure your email is professional. And one note about phone numbers is check your voicemail. Make sure your voicemail message is also professional. A lot of employers will be calling you to set up interviews, so make sure that they know who they're calling when they leave a message and the phone number is listed within your voicemail. So an objective. The objective stands as the thesis of your resume. It's that first line right after your contact information that's telling the employer why they want to read on. So a simple formula that I've kind of found to create an objective is start with your position and then add in what your knowledge area is. So you'll see in this first example, to obtain a position in the import-export industry, so there's that industry that they're naming, that will use my knowledge of business as well as language, leadership, and communication skills. So you know that they already have an educational foundation in business. And what kind of business skills are they? They're language, leadership, and communication. And those skills are going to be represented as the employer reads on in the resume. So you also want to focus your objective on how you would benefit your audience versus what you can gain from employment. So this is your pitch saying, hey, hire me because this is what you can get from my experiences, and this is what I can bring to the table. So you want to avoid phases like looking to build my skills and advance my body of knowledge. That's what you're doing in school, and that's not exactly what the employer wants to be doing when you come and work for them. So you want to be concise and direct, but not vague. So you want to avoid kind of this generic resume language, seeking a challenging position with potential for growth and advancement. It's like, well, which position did you want? Were you applying to 6 different positions and you're just too lazy to change that on your resume? Make sure that you're being descriptive and specific. And then target your objective to each audience that you're applying for. So you're going to have different versions of your resume as you're applying to different jobs. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. So then your education comes next. You always list the most current degree that you're seeking. So if you already have another master's degree or if you have a bachelor's degree from another institution, that would go underneath the most current institution that you're graduating from. So for example, we have James Madison University. You've got the city and state location. They have the type of degree, Bachelor's of Science, the month and the year of graduation. If you're not graduating, let's say until 2017, you can still put May 2017. You don't have to say expected graduation. They kind of get the inference from the future year. You want to list your major and have any kind of concentration. You can also include a minor if you've pursued one. So GPA. Here we have listed the overall, the major, and the minor. You don't have to include all this information. If you want to list just your overall GPA, totally fine. If you don't think your GPA is that great, it's below 2.5, you're like, I just don't want to be judged by that standard, then you can omit your GPA. It's kind of up to you whether or not you include your GPA on your resume. If it's something you're proud of, or if you're going to be graduating with some sort of Latin honors, you could include that instead. So GPA can go either way. It's probably good to talk through with someone the pros and cons of including it. So if you have your high school on your resume, at this point in time, sophomore year of college and on, you don't need to include that information. They know you're at a four-year institution. You had a diploma from high school to get into that four-year institution. So at this point, they don't need that information. And plus, this saves space so that you can include more important information on your resume. So relevant coursework. This is an optional piece that you can include on your resume. If you don't have a lot of direct experiences in that job area that you're trying to get a position with, then you can include coursework that is relevant to the job. So it could be a project you worked on in a class. It could be a research paper that was, over 20 pages and you did a lot of work and you gained a lot of knowledge from that research project. So you want to include that in your resume to show the employer, I do really have this background. So you have that option of listing 2 to 3 courses and bolting out some different projects that you worked on in that class. Or you can go the route of just listing 6 to 8 titles of classes and not a description. And then you can see those actually in the beige handout. You don't have to look now, but later on if you need a reference of how to list coursework. So here also, I don't know if you can see this very well, but in this yellow area is how they've listed that coursework. And you can see it comes right after education. So by the fact that they've put this so high up on the resume, they see it as really important for the employer or graduate school or scholarship committee to check out and know about. That importance, the higher up it is on your resume, the more important it is for them to see. So let's talk about experiences. Experiences can be both paid and unpaid. We're not limited just to the work that we got a paycheck for to include on our resume. Typically with an experience, you want to first name the organization and where it's located. So we have XYZ organization, anywhere Virginia. What your title was, intern or whatever the position name was, and then the dates that you were there. So you can see on this one, they edited a monthly newsletter for the department, streamlining office communication. So you can see that they also have a result within their experience. They're not just saying they edited the newsletter, but this was the result from them editing it. So overall, with your experience section, whenever you make a bullet point, you want to be quantifying something. Let's say you're part of a fundraiser. How much money did you raise as part of that fundraiser? You worked with children. What's the number of children that you worked with? What were the ages? Be descriptive so you can create that big picture. Since they said monthly newsletter, you now know that they had to do it at least once a month versus just saying edited a newsletter. Identify your strengths. This person felt that they had a strength in writing materials for inter-office communication, so they listed that as part of their experience. And you always want to start your bullets with strong action verbs. If you ever have trouble finding the right word to name your actions and your verbs, in that beige packet, which there's some more over by the door if you didn't get one, but in the center is a list of over 50 different action verbs that you can use. So that way you can also vary the verbs that you're using, and you're not just saying assisted, assisted, assisted over and over again. So a skills section. If you wanted to include some skills and highlight those on your resume, these are some different types of areas. And we talked a little bit about them before. So technical skills could be any kind of computer programs, software that you use, programming languages that you're familiar with. You always want to label how familiar you are with those kinds of things. So are you proficient? Could you write a program day one on the job? Or do you need a little more training? So you're familiar with it. It's not completely new to you, but you need some more training. So gives them an idea of what your capabilities are with those technical skills. Anything for foreign language skills. So you can include the basic understanding, conversant, or fluent. Lab or scientific skills, any kind of equipment you can use. And then with interpersonal skills, you can include those more in your experience bullets. So anything with like communication, try to mix that in with your experience more than pulling it out in a separate section. So here's some other content information things you can do. If you have any study abroad or travel experience, especially if it's extensive experience, you can list this, under a variety of sections. So it could be education, international experience, skills, or on its own section. You can also include an honors, awards, and recognition section if you got a scholarship for coming to school, or if you got some sort of community recognition award. Feel free to list those. You want to list these things if you feel like they're important for the employer to know if they're going to make you stand out. Then, of course, any kind of trainings or certifications. These can go under the skills, experience, or its own section, just kind of depending on how you want to market that. So here's a few reminders before we go into format, but a well-prepared resume and cover letter is an essential component to getting that interview. So by having other people review these documents for you, you'll be on a good first step to get that interview. You don't need to list English as a language skill if the resume is written in English. So that also saves you some space. And you're showing your proficiency in English in the English-speaking country by writing that resume in English. You do not need to include personal information such as your picture, age, marital status, race, or religion. I know in OPT, the previous presentation, she mentioned this. So in the US, it's not common to include your picture. If you want to do a LinkedIn profile, that's one way you can get a little more personable. And you can include a link to your LinkedIn profile within your contact information. So if that's something you want to do, then LinkedIn would be the route for that. And then avoid listing an international permanent address, especially if the employer can't reach you at that address. Make sure it's current information. So what are some of the benefits of hiring an international student? You all have a diverse cultural background and the ability to speak more than one language. So that can be appealing to the companies, and especially if they want to be globalizing their business, or if it's already an international population living in that community, thinking like Washington, D.C. Having those bilingual, trilingual skills are going to be very valuable to that employer. Living and studying abroad enables international students to demonstrate a number of skills, such as adaptability, language skills, and also resourcefulness. Has anyone felt resourceful in the last couple of years being here? You've had to really adjust to things, see a few head nods. So be able to communicate how you've overcome some of these challenges you faced. That should be coming through in your resume and cover letter, as these type of skills can be directly linked to the skills desired for the position you're seeking. So think about how you're unique in the fact that you are international and using that as a strength. A couple more reminders. Provide employers a frame of reference when you're referring to foreign companies and schools. So if you had a job in your home country and it's not a very well-known organization, just give a little tidbit of background to that, a little bit of context. My internship was with the largest telecommunications company in Egypt. That's going to help the employer know, oh, okay, this is a big deal. You also want to make sure the resume is free from grammatical and spelling errors, as well as use of awkward language. Read it aloud to yourself. You can be alone in a room, but just read it out loud, and you'll be able to pick up some of those things. Or have a friend read it to you, and then see if you can pick up those kind of awkward language pieces. You also want to maintain up-to-date copies of your resume in the format and language of native countries to serve as a backup for employment in home countries. So you can pass those on to your contacts. Have multiple versions, again, like we talked before. References. So references actually should be on a separate page from your resume. When you write references in that beige handout on the very back is an example of what a reference page looks like. So when you have your references, you want to include the person's name, what their title is at the company, what department they're in, the organization or school that they work for, an address, phone number, email, and their association with you. What's your relationship to that reference? So now format. So we have 3 different format types that we teach students about. The first one is with the more traditional format, and that's chronological. And one thing with chronological is that the information starts with the most recent positions and you work backwards in time. So it's reverse chronological order. So the perks to a chronological format is that your work history is related to the job that you're seeking. That's a reason to use a chronological format. Jobs experiences, like I mentioned, are listed in reverse order. The titles and organizations are emphasized because you're naming the organization or you're using your position title first, so that's what the employer is going to see when they're reviewing these things. And then the accomplishments are highlighted. That's what the purpose of the bullets are. So it's banging those out. Let's say you don't have a lot of experiences that are directly related to the position, then you might want to try one of these other formats. We already talked about that. So, and that's kind of what a picture of a chronological looks like. So functional format. This one can be great if you want to highlight your skills. And the skills were gained in different experiences. They were gained in classroom. They were gained by job shadowing. They were gained through internships. It organizes the information around those functional headings. That way you can better highlight your strengths. The other piece of functional format, it organizes content in an order that best supports the objective, and it's not bound by those dates. So sometimes your best experience could be something you did 2 years ago, and that would fall further down in your resume. Functional format, you can just list that under a skill area, and it brings it up. Titles and work history are second. We'll see that in the example in a minute. And it draws on all sorts of experience. So like I said before, volunteer, activities, membership in clubs, on-campus, coursework. It's all equally important in a functional format. So this is what a functional format looks like. Right under education, they are naming their skills. And then they have technical experience. And these experiences were acquired at different organizations, BreezeNet and the radio station. And then they have their management leadership experience. Again, a variety of places that they gain these skills. And you can see towards the bottom, they list work experience and just the name and dates that they were with that employer. Another example. It's a combination format. This is what we call the best of both worlds. This takes a little bit of the chronological and a little bit of functional. It emphasizes skills, accomplishments, interests, and work experience. And you can use this when you want to emphasize previous activities and or experiences while also highlighting those transferable skills. So let's look at one. So they start their experience section with career-related experience. They're applying to a position that's going to be in international business, so they want to highlight that first. And then they have a skill section. And then they put their work history. So you see a little bit of everything happening. In this example, we have health promotion skills. And then we've got their experience working at Rockingham Memorial Hospital, at the Rockingham Free Clinic, Duke University Medical Center. So they're still listing skills, but then they get right into experience. This is one of my favorite formats, especially if you're newly getting into the working field, because you do have a lot of freedom to move up the most important things. So you have the opportunity to be creative. There's no one right way to format your resume. It's what's going to best represent you and that you're happiest with. So remember, no two resumes will look alike. So don't just grab your friend's resume and copy their formatting because you want to make it unique to you. So if you want to list international experience, for example, we've got an example here where they have their communication skills, their technical, then their international. So it can be great for some of those global companies we talked about before. In this example, you might not be able to see it, but it says lived and studied in France for 3 months, traveled independently throughout Europe, communicated with people of different languages and cultures, and navigated independently between destinations. Showing that independence, that self-determination can be a section that can be valuable for you. Research experience. So this is an example of a research project design. It was a capstone project that they're listing on their resume. And then they also have another research project that they did with the psychology department as well. So you can see how resumes don't have to be just about work experience. Appearance. So with appearance, this is the third part of writing a great resume. You don't want to use a template. Employers can recognize templates really easily. I've also had a student tell me she filled out this great template and then it was like asking her for money for her to actually save it. So a lot of time went into that resume and then she wasn't able to use it because she didn't want to pay the money to save the template. You want to try to stick to 1 page in most cases. If you have a lot of relevant experience, then you can go to 2 pages. It's kind of that rule of thumb. If it's going to be 7-point font to make it 1 page, then make it 2 pages. Go for that normal size font. You only want to use 1 or 2 font styles and sizes with the exception of your name. We talked about that being a bigger font to highlight your name. But within your resume document, you only want 1 or 2 styles at most. Check for spelling and grammatical errors again. You don't want to go any smaller than a 10-point font because they're going to need a magnifying glass to read it at that point. And you don't want your margins, so the sides of the pages, any smaller than a 1/2 inch. And that's just so that it's not bleeding off and they're able to print it. Fill the page, pay attention to white space. These are a lot of tips that we can go over with you in a one-on-one resume review too, after you've created your first draft. You have the option of doing paragraphs or bullets. It's really up to you. Bullets can be read easier, so that's a big advantage, especially if employers are reviewing hundreds of applications. Paragraphs take up less space, and you might have more opportunity to say more. So you have to decide which one's going to work better for you. Then paper choice matters, so make sure you're using a quality paper if you're going to be handing out paper copies of your resume. Make sure it's also a neutral color. So a few final guidelines and appearance with dues. Get your resume reviewed, CAP, Career and Academic Planning, over in the Student Success Center. We offer that service. You could also ask anyone who's maybe a mentor or professor for you. Your peers could be a great person to get feedback from. Think about what your audience wants. We talked about targeting. Make sure you research your company as you're formatting your resume or you're editing it. Organize by importance level. Change those functional headers so that you're bringing up that important information. Use skill sections if that's going to bring up your important skills more. If you think using health services experience is going to bring up those important sections, use that. Use keywords and verbs. So if you find they're talking about communication skills in a job posting, make sure you have the word communication in your resume. There's some companies that use software to scan resumes, and so they use the exact keywords that they have in their job posting to scan resumes. So make sure that you aren't missing out on that opportunity because you didn't use keywords. And again, verbs. So you've got the handout to give you some ideas of some different strong verbs to use. Think about the message you're giving, like what kind of picture am I painting for this employer? And we talked again about making several versions of your resume, make sure it's easy to read. And if a position is still in progress, you can say for the dates, like fall 2012 to present, so that you're currently in the position. And you can also use present tense verbs when you're describing that experience. So hopefully that kind of clears that. A couple of don'ts. You'll never use I in a resume. It might feel kind of awkward to do, but that's just kind of the American culture with resumes. Even with your objective statement, you could just start right out saying, seeking a position. Don't use course numbers, but use course names. They're not going to know what G Health 100 is, so list out what the name is of the course. Don't overuse capital letters because you think that it's a great highlighting tool. It's just going to be too much. Some other important things on here. You don't need to list the full address and phone number of experiences. That can be researched later. You just want the title of the company. We also say to try to write it tight because you only have so much space on that one page of your resume. So don't be overly wordy. Don't be putting in too many that's. Try to see if you can make it as concise as possible, but still be descriptive, so don't be too concise. So as I mentioned before, career and academic planning. We offer personalized one-on-one resume reviews. You schedule an appointment. You can do that by visiting the 3rd floor of the Student Success Center and just talking to Shayna, our wonderful receptionist, and asking for an appointment. You can call in. We also do scheduling through our online job board, which is Recruituke. And we also have some resume reviews happening today downstairs in conference room 5. So there's several other services that we're going to be offering this school year, and that includes mock interviews. So you can actually do a practice interview with an employer versus a career counselor. So this would be like Target headquarters, Kohl's, Deloitte. If you want to try out your interview skills and get some feedback, then mock interviews would be a great way to go. If you're looking for internships or career experiences starting this summer, our spring career fair is coming up, February 17th and 18th. There can be different employers each day, so check out our website for who's going to be there and who you can talk to. And then Recruiter Duke, the online system. Upload your resume there, have it open and searchable for employers, and also seek out positions through that system. And everything can be found on jmu.edu/CAP, where you can just search CAP once you get to the JMU website. So at this point, do we have any questions? There's a lot of information. Okay. Yeah.
This is one. Should we save our documentation in terms of Word or PDF or?
Great question. Yeah. So you can create your resume in Word, but when you go to submit it to an online system, or a lot of employers are using some sort of online job board now, use a PDF. So it locks down the formatting of your resume. So after you've got all your edits and your changes made, file, save as, change that to PDF, and you got that copy. The second step to that is to open the PDF and make sure none of that formatting got changed. You don't want your one-page resume to all of a sudden be 2 because a line fell. If you do decide to go with the 2-page route, I didn't mention this before, but put your name on the top of the second page in case those pages get separated. That way they still have your information. Yeah.
Any requirement for the Word type, the format for Word?
What's that?
So the format for Word.
For your resume?
No, what type of Word? What type of
font? Any like traditional typeface font. Times New Roman can be kind of big and take up a lot of space. I like Georgia personally, so anything that's easy to read. You don't want it to be any sort of handwriting font. But there are some traditional ones. Arial is pretty common. So, and those suggestions you can see on our website too if you need additional ones. Any other questions? Yeah.
I was wondering if we can put in features or hobby, because a lot of companies they ask to give out tips you're allowed to give it out, but have to be a little bit professional. So
yeah, that's probably something you can include in the bottom of your resume if it's relevant to the job. Let's say it's a startup company with a really wild culture and you are a skydiver, and that's going to connect back with the CEO or the hiring manager, then you could list those kind of interests and hobbies. If they are not going to connect with that organization's mission, or if it's not going to help you get that position, then you don't want to include it. So it's a balancing act. Any other questions? Yeah, it's going to be posted online on OIP's website. And last year's is already up there, so I only made a few edits. So, yeah. Okay. Well, if you are interested in any of CAP's resume services, you've already completed step 2. Congratulations. So I'm just going to leave these over here with the other handouts. If you want to check out how to do those mock interviews or sign up for our one-on-one resume review. So thank you all for your time.